welcome everybody to the Communities in Place scrutiny meeting on Wednesday, the 29th of November. Thank you all for coming. We'll go straight into the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Nicola?
Good afternoon. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Castle.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2, the minutes from the previous meeting, which are on pages 1 to 10. Does everybody have any issues, questions arising out of those? Yeah.
Jen, can I just draw attention to page 8 and the bottom part of the page where it says some councillors were unable to use their Fix My Fleet on the council forms. That's still the issue and still a problem. So is that something we're going to look into? And the next point from there is further training was welcomed. I would like to think we'd have that diary and some sort of the system ready for the Fix My Street process as it gets bigger and bigger, the councillors and elected members.
Can have some training on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, can we pass both those points on to?
Yeah, I understand the issue about the telephone system, and I think it's been passed. I think Chris said they pass it on to IT because there was an issue. You can access and Fix My Street on the council mobiles.
But just to come back on that, I accessed the app on my phone 2 years ago, and I was refused 24 hours after that. You need permissions from the administrator. So
Okay,
thank you.
yeah, thanks. And Nick.
Thanks. Says on page 3, second last bullet point, advice that homeless young people should really know online to be investigated. Just wondered if we heard anything back from that.
Okay, thanks. Can you just stop circulating on email? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Also, on page 4, it's the first bullet point. It says that an up-to-date version of the homelessness action plan was going to be circulated. I haven't picked it up, but I might have missed it. Is anyone able to tell me whether it has been circulated or not?
I'm sure I circulated that by email that afternoon.
Straight after the meeting.
It's probably just me missing it then.
I'll check
We'll
that,
get to it.
but and resend it to you if not. I'm sure I did.
Thanks.
Right. Okay. So are we happy to agree these are true and fair record? Great, thank you. Item 3 is disclosure of members' interests. Does anybody have anything they would like to disclose? No? Good. Item 4, the forward plan of cabinet decisions, which I think Sean will tell us this is really on here for information. So
But nothing to add, Chair.
Yeah.
Format.
Yeah. Okay, we'll set that as read. And then, sorry, sorry, Nick.
A couple of quick questions on the forward plan.
Yes, of course, yeah.
There's a reference to the BSIP, Bus Service Improvement Plan, and there's a reference to the Great Northumberland Forest. I just wondered if those are 2 things that might be able to come back to scrutiny at some point in the future, just for an update.
Yes.
It looks like there's been some developments on both.
So I think this is one of the sort of questions where we need to have do we want to scrutinise it after it's been implemented and been operating for a while to scrutinise its effectiveness?
Well, I mean, Chair, that's really the purpose of circulating part 1 of the forward plan papers, where we actually tell you
What's coming up?
how the cabinet dealt with it, whether or not you feel as though scrutiny should further look at it down the line. So what we tend to do is we tend to let cabinet deal with it and then review that and say
Yes.
request for the scrutiny.
Yes. So are you happy with that, Nick? Is that we basically pick a time in the future once it's had time to bed in and we can see whether it's actually been effective rather than kind of going through the motions of looking at something before it.
Yeah. I don't think there's any rush. I don't think there have been some developments.
Just need to
find out more about them, but I'm happy for it to wait until the time's ideal.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you. Anything else on forward plan?
Sorry, Chair, could I'm just reading this again on page 15, top of the page, and it's sprinkled all over the place. The contribution of 0.005 million. Can we not just have that written in properly terms that we can all understand. I mean, that's just.
So is that 55 grand,
Well,
50 grand or £500,000 then? Isn't it? Yeah.
You know, what is it? I mean, and above it's 0.067 and 0.088. It's just.
Yeah.
Just a comment. You know, if I wouldn't be saying here is 0.0005 million pounds, but you haven't been saying it's 5 grand or 50 or what actually.
Can I just say it's probably the gist of it, millions and millions and millions. You forget exactly where the point is.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's point noted and. Just in the wrong. Nothing's good about it.
Yeah, can I just come in on that? Probably had more of a discussion about this than we've ever done in the past. I just wanted to welcome the report on page 13 at 64.2 and the replacement of the voting platoons for one special that I for. That's in my ward, and I want to thank you very much.
Good. Noted. Great. So we'll now move, well, actually the next item was the corporate feedback performance report, which was due to come today, but unfortunately, for various reasons of officer availability and illness, it's not been possible. So I think we just have a very brief discussion. I'm sure we've all read it. It's been to cabinet. It's fairly straightforward report. It went sort of through cabinet without too much discussion, and it's just wholeheartedly sort of, supported. My gut feel on reading it is that we don't need to defer this report to the next meeting, because actually I think by the time we get to the next meeting, it's already happened. It comes to this committee traditionally as a sort of point of information, and it's usually for noting. We've had the reports, we've read it. I think we could probably note it without bringing it back to the next meeting, because if you look at the forward plan later on, there's some quite meaty reports coming in early next year, and I would hate to dilute those with something which is really just a sort of information report. So my suggestion, if everybody would agree with me, would be to just basically accept this as noted. If you have any specific questions, you could email Sean and copy Mark and I in, and we'll get answers to those questions. We'll circulate them to the whole committee. But I don't really want to sort of push it down the road for just because we've got too many important things coming up. Yeah.
Can I just raise one issue? Really, the actual delivery of the corporate complaints system.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've got is some people who've actually made a complaint. I had one yesterday, in fact, and I actually sent it off to the senior exec and said, can you get this sorted?
Yeah.
And it is a level 1 complaint, but it hasn't been responded to.
Yeah.
So really what I think we would like as a committee is to actually have the due process just on paper, but maybe you can give it to us on paper exactly how the complaints procedures work and at what time they hit the ombudsman.
Yeah.
Who makes the decision to go to the ombudsman, what they all just process, because I think it would help us, because there are a lot of complaints coming in, but at what stage and how are they dealt with. And if they're not dealt with in time, does that indicate you can go straight to the ombudsman if the person wants to do that because they haven't had a response, or do they go back? Except, so it's just actually all of us understanding the mechanism behind how they. I mean, I can ask Julie, but I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, no, we could circulate that to the whole committee. I think that's a good idea. Yeah, Sean, are you okay with that? Yeah, brilliant. Eileen.
It's just a quick one. Everybody yesterday must have gotten an email off someone resident.
Yeah.
Saying about the complaint procedure isn't effective. Are you going to respond to that email?
I imagine an officer will respond to that email. I don't know. I haven't seen that email, so I don't know whether it's because
you're in the email trail. You obviously haven't read it yet.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
But everybody on this group is in that email trail.
Yeah.
And there's words being used like vexatious or something. I mean, it's a massive long email,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to read it out.
Yeah.
But I would urge you to have a look at it, Chair, and then
But if a member could forward that email to me, I'll make sure that Julie sees it.
Yeah, it's presumably been sent to all councillors, has it?
not just us on scrutiny.
Oh, is it? Okay, right.
When was that sent, Eileen, sorry?
It was sent in your honour as well. Mark Mather, the last one. It was sent on Tuesday, the 28th of November, 1559.
It's a complaint again about somebody.
It's,
Is it?
Yes.
am I allowed to name the person?
No, probably best not to, yeah.
I mean, in fairness, if Julie had been here, you probably wouldn't have been able to do that anyway.
Yeah, it's just, I read it yesterday and I just thought, oh.
Well, we can make sure that's forwarded on and I'm sure an appropriate response will be yeah.
Have you found it yet?
I haven't yet, no, but I'll look, I'll pick it up after the meeting and we'll make sure it gets, Sean gets a copy and Sean can pass it on to somebody.
Thank you.
Can you make sure that you actually respond to that email? Because we are a scrutiny committee, basically explaining to that person
Yeah.
what you are doing. And also if you can inform us the outcome of what happens,
Okay.
because
I'll
we'll
have-
be looking at complaints.
Yeah, I haven't seen the email yet, so we'll formulate an appropriate response, yeah.
You.
Chair, can I just come back there on and remark is that maybe we know the report, we have a discussion, anybody got any searching questions, they can bring them back. I'm not comfortable with that. We've got a scrutiny piece of agenda at work coming, and it's very important. It hits a lot of things that maybe will open up, I think, presentations, and I totally get the whole idea of officers, but I don't like the idea of kicking it down the road. So the reality is, do I want to see this come as a presentation? Yes, I do. Do I want to see it as a bit of scrutiny? Well, yes, I do. But that's only me. And I'll go with it.
Okay, well, what I suggest then was we should literally move to a vote and decide whether we want it to come to the next meeting. If we do, then we do, and if we don't, we don't. So
Well, my point is that if this was just.
it has to be kicked down the road
Yeah, but-
because it can't be done today.
Yeah.
But my point is, if there was enough information there, we would have gotten it as a report, as an emailed report, and we could have went through it and had some dialogue around that. But this is being structured to be a scrutiny agenda item. And I'm just uncomfortable because this is the first time in all the years I've been on the council that we've ever done this. So
Right.
I'll go with the majority, but I'm totally against it.
Okay.
Before we go to a vote, could I say that I didn't find the report very well written, and that means that I've got more questions than I'd like to have. And to be honest, emailing them would probably be easier for me. So it suits me to not have it come back to scrutiny and to email the questions. But like Brian, I'm actually very happy either way.
Okay. Well, we'll just take a vote. If you like it to come to the next
Move to
scrutiny.
second.
Sorry?
Move and second a resolution proposal.
Okay, well,
Wait, Brian proposed.
I'll propose that that we take it as read, and if we have any questions, we send them to the chair, the vice chair, and Sean, and those questions can get circulated and to the group. If anybody wants to second that.
I'll second that happily.
And then, so all those in favour of that, please raise your hand.
3, 4.
4. And then all those against that, please raise your hands.
2, 3, 4, 5.
5. Okay, so it needs a counter proposal.
We recommend that it comes back to the next committee.
Okay. Can somebody second that?
Second that.
Yeah. And if we have a vote in favour of that, and I guess it'll. 5.
Yes, that one.
Right, that's done. Okay, come back to the next meeting.
4.
Well, 4 again, so I'm assuming.
4 against.
Yeah.
Well, Chair, the next meeting, we could just have an extended meeting rather than knock something off the agenda.
I think we'll have to do that. Yes. Yeah. So.
Write it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big agenda next time anyway, because we propose to have the active
Yeah. So just be prepared for a long meeting next time, everybody. Yeah. Sorry, James.
Accept my apologies for the next meeting.
And mine. Okay, no, that's great, thank you. And then the next item is I think Rob is introducing, and we've also got Liz here as well. And this is a planning services performance report. I think Rob's going to do a brief introduction, and we'll kind of get into questions as okay, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Rather than just presenting a set of tables, I wanted to tell a story here. And fundamentally, the story is about planning performance. It's a system with, I would say, lots of moving parts in it. Some of them pull against each other, some of them support each other, and we are measured, and we measure ourselves on outputs. For example, how quickly we grab planning permissions, system management tools, and outcomes on the ground. So how many houses we build. I've set out in the report the story about planning is fundamentally a binary decision-making process. At the end of the day, you either get an applicant who's unhappy with the result, or a local resident or residents groups or local member can be unhappy with the result. There are probably the most number of performance measures on of actually any council service as this report goes through. And fundamentally, we are trying to balance all these competing agendas against each other in a democratic world where you're looking at speed, quality of the outcome, trying to get trying to facilitate as many jobs and good outcomes as possible and reflect the public opinion. And it is impossible to keep every one of those metrics happy at the same time. We do benchmarking work with other authorities, and we lead on national work on other elements, for example, on validation. We could improve elements of performance in here, for example, speed, by taking an approach which we call the Redbridge approach, which is the fastest authority in the country, who refuse applications in 6 weeks if they are not perfectly up to standard. We, though, try and not use planning as an audit tool, but an added value tool where we try and work with applicants to get schemes where they can be approved. And that is reflected in our higher than average approval rate. I'm not going to go through the full report, but I think we've had about complaints already. And if you look at objectively at the complaints against the planning department, there are far fewer complaints upheld against us, either by the local government ombudsman or in terms of the actual merit of our decisions by the planning inspectorate than the national average. And on both those measures, we are significantly better than the national average. Okay. It'd be remiss of me not to talk about pressures. And we try to balance some of these different metrics against each other. And the one you'll see most clearly, perhaps, I'll just take you to, I think it's a good example. If I could take you, the page numbers are at the top of the page. Let's take you to page 5. It's a very simple one. At the start of the pandemic, when recovery, the economic recovery of the county was really important to get in and support businesses wanting to invest or change, we diverted efforts to major, what are called county macro applications, basically the complex matters. Okay. And so we hover at about 100% target that we achieve on those. At the same time, though, and it mirrors it, we have to take some effort and take our foot off the gas a bit on the minor applications, and you can see those dipped. But since then, we have said, okay, now we can put more emphasis on the minor applications, and you've seen a correspondent improvement in performance. That story you can replicate through all these metrics in here, in that you cannot have cake and eat it normally. So what I would say is, I could use the Redbridge model for performance management and up speed, But what Redbridge actually don't do very well is actually get stuff built on the ground that's of any quality. So they're failing all the time on housing delivery. I think about 5-year housing on supply. So none of these bits of this machine can be tweaked without affecting other ones. Okay. I won't go through all the performance measures. I think there's a useful summary where I've said some we need more work on. Enforcement is an issue. I'm talking about resources there. For lots, we are top 25% authorities, and for some, we are top 1% authorities in this country. And there are 470 local authorities who do planning. Okay. Thank you. I'll leave it at that. There were questions.
Yes, no, brilliant. Could you just say a couple of words about the, it's early days yet, but in the autumn statement last week, there was a bit of a fanfare about
Planning reform.
Planning reform, giving councils more money if they hit targets.
Could I make a suggestion? Could we go to that to the end? Because
Okay.
there are a number of issues
That will come out before that.
come out which may actually answer questions later on.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
I'll do that as a slot at the end.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so we've showed a picture there, which has been sort of partly quantitative and partly qualitative. And so if I start by just sort of asking a question about what can be done. I mean, what do you do? Sorry, not what can be done, but what do you do in terms of, because you've sort of almost possibly conflicting aims of trying to get applications processed, but at the same time progress applications to the highest possible quality. So could you just sort of give us a bit of a flavour for how that works and
Yeah. Okay. I think that manifests in one issue, in that we hit targets, and all the statutory targets we hit. Okay. The ones that we have to that take time is that when applications come in, if you've ever been involved in a planning application in detail, it's not an auditing process. So we don't get them in and say, is it good enough or bad enough to approve, and sit there and think about it. What we try and do is, by using the advice of technical other bodies such as the lead local flood authority, the Environment Agency, Natural England, National Highways, we look at how we can improve schemes. And some of those consultee requirements work against each other as well. So there's a balancing exercise. And at the same time, we are trying to respond to concerns raised by the public or parish and town councils. Okay. How we've sought to improve performance on this is actually, Liz and I have done, and our teams have done a lot of work actually looking at what the problems are. We've been involved nationally with some of these issues. So, for example, the starting point often isn't good. So many applications are put in insufficient information. It ought to be contacting, say, the Environment Agency, then working with the Environment Agency to get more information from the applicant, which causes delays. So what we've looked at is the absolute front end of this. So we're involved in a national piece of work looking at how we validate applications with a view to getting better quality submissions in. We've looked at our workflows to get the process quicker. And the one thing we are doing now, which we've been taken over, is sometimes we spend years working on an application. I mean, to say at the end of the day, it isn't good enough and we're going to refuse it. We are doing more like a triage approach, where non-starter application we are looking to refuse more earlier on. Okay. Right, you have to balance against other targets. So, for example, if you refuse too many, you will end up losing more appeals. In parallel, I've been doing a lot of training sessions with parish and town councils to help members there get how they can better represent their public. And we are doing things like, as well, trying to improve the quality of particularly residential development via work on things like design guides. I would say that I was just, so this is a very long answer to a very simple question. Remember, government uniquely in most planning systems across Europe uses us as well to do other things. So in England, the majority of affordable housing is delivered through the land use planning system. So trying to tackle that one as well. And members around the room have seen controversial applications where we've negotiated very healthy affordable housing contributions. But they see other problems and those get refused. So there's a tension there in that we are trying to use the planning system, but both to deliver quality, speed, democracy in terms of transparency, and do stuff for government. So government keeps bolting on things. And the latest one being, even though it was announced they weren't going to do it, they're going to do it now, is a thing called biodiversity net gain, which is about us delivering ecological improvement by multiplying. So none of that makes this easier or quicker to do. And so Liz's job really is a holding back the tide issue of trying to manage, a very large application workload. We are in the top 15 now of the major application numbers in the country. It means when you talk about glibly about between 5,000 and 6,000 applications a year, that means making a decision every 18 minutes of the working day to keep on top of this. So this is all. This is why I don't want this to sound like excuses, but this is a system. I'll keep coming back to this catchphrase with a lot of moving parts in it.
Yeah.
And you cannot balance one against the other without, either a developer being upset, a local resident being upset, government being upset, or was not delivering one of the corporate priorities.
Great, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. Anne.
Now, can I just, thank you very much. Can I just remind everyone why I think I will ask if this could come through. One of the reasons is that Sandwich, we have an officer here to respond to an ombudsman finding which came to this committee. And they had to legally bring the report to this committee. And one of the things the ombudsman has stated was that the procedure or the processes in place were incorrect. In fact, the way at the end, and I can't remember paraphrase exactly what it said. However, and the officer was very clear that the council had been doing that for a long time because it actually took less time. And it meant that the officers didn't have so much work. And obviously that they've been told, obviously the department's been told it's got to go back. But that actually addressed at the same time, which is underneath it, is the number of applications officers are dealing with. And that was the thing that was made at the time of the amount of officers that were there. And it's here in this form where you've got the principal's officer. The county council is 45, whereas the English one is 20. And then you get down to the officer, just there's a whole lot down, but an officer 75, English 40, senior 50, English 25, and it goes on like that. Now the point being was, and I think I said at the time, it was the amount of work that our planners are having to manage over a period of time. And likewise, the enforcement officers are under the same level of pressure. And they have got, I don't know, I think one of mine's got about 500 or 400, 500, an awful lot of pressure. And there are views, but also on top of that, I do have problems with the turnover of planners in my ward. Changed. There's been a change of planners come back, and the people who come planners have come back and said, oh, no, we don't agree with that. So there is problems within the system because if you're working in a workforce and you actually, it's too much, you go and find some work somewhere else where you can get less workforce as a planner. So there is an innate problem right throughout this. And I can understand people having it difficult to actually manage all these planning applications. Not only the management application, to manage the applicants, never mind about the parish councils and the other hundreds of people in some cases come in with a real sort of, and it's a lot of work. And the expectations are enormous. So I think basically, the thing about the report that came back from the ombudsman it really outlined what we have, which is a concern about the number of planners we have dealing with the planning applications and also enforcement officers.
Yeah,
Can we solve this?
Can we split that into two then? 'Cause
Yes.
there's an element here of the planning development and there's planning enforcement,
Uh,
and it's about recruitment and retention.
Yeah.
And overall resource, which it presumably may not be about either. It may be about budgets and things like that. So do you want to give us a bit of a flavour on
Yeah.
both of those things?
There are some fascinating points come out of this, and I had one of those moments of clarity when I was writing this report. Okay. There was last year I read a report, a national report done by the LGA about the resourcing and the problems of enforcement in English planning authorities. And it said, I can circulate it actually afterwards, after this, it might be an interesting reading. It said approximately 80% of English local authorities are seeing increased backlogs of enforcement activity, okay, enforcement cases, okay. We redid our enforcement strategy and adopted a new one in February of this year, trying to focus on the major schemes. I'll be honest, rather than some of the neighbour disputes we get dragged into, to enable us to tackle some of the big ones. But actually, we need to take a step back, and local government is under pressure. Okay, we all know that. But take your minds back to pre-local government reorganisation. Each district had between 1.5 and 2.5 officers, and the county had an enforcement team. So conservatively, there's probably between 12 and 15 enforcement officers out in the field at any one time, okay, in this county. We now have 4.5 enforcement staff. The problem is, and the national report gets into this, the problem is that enforcement does not generate any fee income whatsoever, unlike dealing with planning applications where we get an application fee in. So it's always difficult to justify enforcement staff. And this comes across, the entire sector. Okay, we'll talk about enforcement more later. In terms of development management, there's some interesting things in this. I'll take you to page 15. Actually, actually, with inquiries and feedback. And I've got something off of the. This isn't on applications. This is just through the general email inbox. The planners get about 20,000 emails a year. That's been pretty. Remember as well, over the same period, there's probably 26,000 messages put onto the public access system in terms of the planning applications. And all those have to be reflected, acknowledged, acted on. And I fully accept that given that case load we're talking about, and that number of interfaces with the public, that we have had to, be fairly firm about when and when we do respond. We do, there's a figure in there, and we check this, nothing like lagging and things like that. When we do our case closure, but lagging was 99.9%. But some local authorities have done things like, for years, have done things like, they do not accept any calls or any direct contact. We've always tried to balance it. But I know, and Liz knows, that there are always some tensions in that. But it's a symptom of just how busy we are to the amount of correspondence we get. Okay. I'll say development management in terms of resourcing, fine. Again, so there's all very long answers to very short questions.
No, that's fine.
Development management. There is new planning fees coming in after us collectively lobbying since 2018. And we will need to take a corporate decision. Obviously, most of that will be taken up in terms of, we've made assumptions of the budget of that already. But the one thing I would say, and the strategic leadership team have asked for a deep dive into enforcement, and are not arguing that, I cannot accept it. I cannot predict any situation where we could get up the pre-LGR resourcing, but maybe we have a different think about how we have the enforcement team structured, and maybe we look at, just for example, rather than having one central team with 4.5 in, we look at a north, south, east and west team corresponding to the development management teams with 2 officers in each.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing isn't really us asking for a magic, a bottomless pit.
Yeah.
I would also add on, but this is not time to talk about it, is that at other authorities I've been used to as well having a fighting fund, let's call it. Any direct action or enforcement action we take, we have to find out of existing budgets and staff underspends, etc. There is an argument for having a recyclable fund. You take action, you put a charge on the land, you recover the money, and then you put it back into the system. I've been talking to our new monitoring officer about that, and I think would enjoy a piece of work to look at this in detail.
That increased enforcement action would also act as a deterrent, because presumably if some of the more opportunistic builders across the county realise that the enforcement resource is stretched, then they might be trying things that they wouldn't ordinarily try.
I just
One second, yeah.
I should bring the context of this, yes. And the example I will give, you'll all have seen this. When Public Protection prosecute a newsagent on a corner shop for selling cigarettes to children, we always do a press release on it. We don't do a press release on it to rub their noses in it. We do a press release on it for awareness that the authority is willing to take action. Okay. I would say though, and it's within this report, is that since we've been taking a bit more of an assertive approach to enforcement, we have seen the biggest increase in the number of enforcement notices served of any large local authority in England by this authority now, and that's been taking place over the last 18 months. But that has stretched our resource and our teams to the absolute limit to do that.
Can I just ask the one question? I've got somebody in mind on a certain road in the Stocksfield. He's been looking at enforcement, and it's all the way through. It's the legal team are so slow, I am informed, in actually helping the enforcement to provide the legal documents that are required to go out. And I just think that is something that I don't know what the figures are about or whatever, but that obviously needs requirement, because it's not the enforcement team who dealt the legal, it's the legal team. So I think that it'd be interesting to find out what the issue is and whether if an enforcement officer wants enforcement notice legally, I can't remember what the word is anyway, that the legal team act on it and don't take a long time.
Yeah, I think at a distance that could be a diagnosis of a delay. So what happens is that the enforcement team draft the enforcement notice, and then it's checked off by legal, and the legal coordinate, who it's served on, any background searches to determine anyone with an interest in the land. Remember, it isn't just the person who did the deed who enforced against, it's the person who owns the land. And if there's a mortgage on that land, you also serve on the company who hold the mortgage. Okay. I would say though, in defence of legal colleagues, is that they also draft our section 106 notices and a variety of other legal instruments. And I know from my work in housing now that the housing department gets them to do a lot of work as well, and they have a finite resource. And I'll come on to changes in the system at the end, but it may be that a look is needed in terms of do we outsource part of it or not. But templated approaches may be one way forward, the more than we use now. But I know that Liz has done lots of work on how we do section 106s, and that seems to be quicker now, but it's still common problem at all local authorities in terms of legal capacity for doing this work as well.
So just before I ask Brian to come in, because our sort of purpose as a scrutiny committee is to try and sort of highlight issues, and is it generally the view around the table that people would support encouraging cabinet member friend here to encourage more resource into planning enforcement? I mean, I certainly feel, sort of, not so much actually in my own ward, but I do hear about enforcement issues, and clearly it's an area that would benefit from more resource. Now, we can't order the cabinet to do that, but we could certainly suggest that they take a good look at it, particularly in the context of the extra money that might be coming in from refunds of planning fees from government. So,
Yeah, Chair, I was wondering if we're putting a recommendation in, like, to recommend the cabinet to consider the investment in enforcement team and the addition of a rural and fighting fund to be able then to support them in this work or something like that.
Would everybody happy to support that? Brian, were you going to talk about enforcement, or were you?
Just to touch on that as well, I think it's around finance. I know you're talking about finance, but when it comes down to budgeting, and I'll bring on my reasons why I wanted to come in, but I agree with the direction. What I would say is, I think we need more teeth to that. So,
Okay.
Victoria, I'll come in now.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Firstly, thank you very much for this report coming through, Rudy. As a previous chair, and I'm a new chair or vice chair of planning, I want to get my teeth in it. We've had numerous conversations. Nothing personal, but I don't like the way it's been delivered. I think I would have liked to have went through page by page or have a graph, because at the minute we're scattergun, we're all over the place. We're talking about everything. And the other thing is, you're talking about new policies. Scrutiny's looking as a past tense to this, so we want to see what's worked past tense to where we're going to the next stage. So it's good to talk about new policies, but I don't think this is a place. Maybe at the end of the report. So it's nothing being funny. I agree with you when you turn around and you mention speed, quality. I've got in brackets, it should fit in. I'm still unsure about how highways work in respect of the planning. Because in one instance, a decision of a planning committee, sometimes it works for highways, sometimes it doesn't. It's a consideration. Is it a stopgap? And probably that's why over the last 2.5 years, under this new committee with new members, I've been at you all the time about planning, because the planning processes and policies change. And I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to grab something by the tail, and it's really hard. I want to come back to Anne's point about the turnover of staff. We're losing a lot. Well, we've lost staff that have gone, either they're retired, a lot of them's moved to new authorities, working for more money and less workloads. And we've got new people that are coming in. It really, they do the job, they're fine, they're qualified, but do they understand planning? And we've touched on enforcement. There are decisions made through planning that are correct. But on the flip side of that coin, it gives enforcement a big headache, and they don't work hand in hand. And that's my experiences as the chair. So there's that bit. The other bit, I don't know how strong our local plan is. We recently adopted NCC plan, where we've all got thick booklets where you can work your own town out, and there's a boundary around that town. I just need to know the robustness of that policies. Coming back to enforcement. Enforcement's got no teeth, none whatsoever. And the reality is, we've all got areas within where there's been a bit of slippage. We've got where building processes have been started and stopped through enforcement, and they've been great. They've served the notice. So they served the notice. What happens after that? And I know of structures that are 3/4 built and are still there. And not in my ward, I'm talking about the southeast part of Northumberland, because that's what I can be responsible for. So we serve the notices. I would like to know how long the list is, the staff that are dealing with. I think you've touched on that. You mentioned about a deep dive. Now we have a deep dive with a shark on there with teeth. And let's get a reputation that says you can't just do anything that you want to do in Northumberland, because we'll come back. The legal team. And I've marked it on one of the pages back here. And, yeah, they're very, very successful. But I'm sorry, you pick your own battles. unless you're going to win that argument 150%, you never take the ones that maybe is a challenge. And that's my experience in the past. Now, I don't know what's happening now because that dialogue for me doesn't work. But it's great to see a percentage and see figures, but it's like me having a fight with a big guy or a little guy. So at the end of the day, you're bringing in your own challenges there. The 106 monies, I'm unsure and where that goes, and I think we should understand that a little bit more. Affordable housing, we're well behind with the numbers on that as I look at the figures. So again, you mentioned the word upset. I'm not bothered about upsetting anybody as long as we get the right decisions for the areas that we represent and it legally, and it's the right thing that fits in. And same again, there's a lot of things that are brought up there. The staff are trying their utmost and their best to do what they can do. But as I've just said to my colleague before this meeting, I was doing a pre-inquiry. You try ringing the planning department helpline desk as a Northumberland County Councillor, there's no answers. There's nothing comes back. There's no kind of dialogue, what we used to have probably 4 or 5 years ago with officers. And that's my big concern. So sorry, there's a lot of bad news in there, but I would have liked, it wouldn't have been as bad. It would have went through it page by page by page.
Can I just pick a few points up here? There's a few, a few points. Okay. Just to make one point about enforcement. Please bear in mind, I get as many emails from members saying, why are we victimising this poor person and taking enforcement action against them? As I do, we should have a zero tolerance. And that exposes a tension there, okay? And that in the abstract, there's always a lot of support for much more aggressive action. But actually, when it comes down to individual cases, and some of them are, some of them, let's be honest, some of them are situations where someone's made a mistake or been advised badly by a contractor or a builder. And other times, it's a willful disregard, okay? All I can say is we are serving more enforcement notices now, and we are taking more direct action now than we are. But that is, hugely expensive direct action. And you have to look at how you can recover the costs of that. Okay. Just a few things. The section 106, what it's spent on. We produce a annual infrastructure funding statement, goes through where the money comes in, what it comes out at. Maybe we could circulate that again.
Yes.
I think it's been here.
Yeah. Can I just come back on that one? Could you make that a quarterly? Because the government papers on home bills and things like that, you give that number through to government on a quarterly basis, I believe. So can we do the 106?
It's many of these performance metrics and on housing delivery, we do it as an annual survey return to government.
Yeah.
So and it's a fairly long-winded exercise in terms of looking at completions on site.
If you could circulate what you've got,
Yeah.
because actually this is a report about planning services, which is slightly different to section 106. Housing delivery, but I think it'd be useful for us to see that.
So on affordable housing, it's affordable housing is an odd one in that there's always a lag in the system, and it is true. If you look at the last 12 months on the corporate performance report, we undershot the delivery target. So let's say, for example, the target's 650 and we delivered 350. In that period, we negotiated over 1,400 affordable houses, but those get built out at a much slower rate than us agreeing them. Okay, but the report will explain that. Question about the local plan. It's a good one, actually. We've got a new local plan that sets the bar much higher for many areas in terms of quality, sustainability. The way of measuring it, I think, is appeal success rate. In other words, if we are refused, because we refuse on the basis of what's in the local plan as a starting point. And if we were moving into a territory where we were consistently losing lots of appeals, so that would be a window into something being amiss either in our decision-making system or the local plan. I know the headline figures, and it's been remarkably statistically consistent over the last 25 years in that normally local authorities successfully defend about 63% of their decisions to people. We defend about 82% of our decisions, which means that there's and that's a performance measure for government, and we are always really secure on that one.
Just ask about those 82% of the the other 18%.
Yeah.
How many of those are where the planning committee has overturned the recommendation?
It's really low.
Yeah,
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, that's good. That's encouraging.
It's really low. We do get them, definitely, and it's reported back in the reports that we do to committee, but the percentage overall is low.
Okay.
yeah.
Just to come back on that one, like I said, we've all got a brochure there with a big black line around all the communities around Northumberland. Surely if there's a plan application that comes from outside of that area, it should be an instant, actually, no, we're not going to talk about that. So what was the whole idea of putting the line there in the first place? Why waste all your time having the conversation?
Yeah.
Rules are rules, and if that's a line, you don't go the other side.
Yeah. And that's a really fascinating question. And that takes us into the world of why planning is complex, right? The local plan isn't a blueprint, right? It's a set of very firm guiding principles. So let's take both scenarios there, okay? So if it's inside the settlement boundary, on an allocated site for housing, the presumption is that you approve it. If it's not supported by the plan, the presumption is you don't support it, unless there are compelling reasons to do so otherwise. So we refuse schemes inside the settlement boundary for residential development that we don't think are good enough quality. And likewise, you sometimes see sites outside the settlement boundary where there's a very special set of circumstances. So, for example, a rural diversification business or a piece of brownfield land. I'm thinking of, say, the Marley Bricks, the Marley Tiles site near Morpeth, which is out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Greenbelt. You'd say default answer, refuse every application. No, it's a problem site, and we try and look at ways of saying, is there a use for it? Okay. In terms of training, I think Brian made another good point there about new staff. We do have a big staff turnover at the moment, and that is because things like our colleagues in North Yorkshire, when North Yorkshire became a unitary, went through its version of LGR in April of this year. They took the opportunity to email directly every single one of our member of staff directly to offer them a job on more money and less work. Okay. And cool.
The planning goes in Hexham, doesn't it?
and some of them are going to put a bite at that. And we've lost 3 to the planning inspectorate over the last 18 months, which actually, though, is actually a vote in confidence that we train our staff well. But we've lost one in the last few weeks. Yeah. One of our ones we bought in ourselves from Scotland and trained up. In terms of new stuff, though, the one thing we are doing now is we have a internal training program where we run training sessions for all the new staff on both technical issues and decision-making issues. And actually what we do now, like colleague from housing or from estates, we share that training as well. And just very quickly, one of the points that Councillor Dale made, and I put on this report a very uninteresting annex for a good reason. Okay, if you go to Appendix A, the black box, and I talked about making it was a relatively minor procedural error in one of the applications we dealt with. I put this list in just as a window into the different types of planning applications we deal with each one, right? Each of these can have its own validation requirements, that can be different. Each of them have different procedural ways of dealing with it. And each of them has different information requirements. And there's more than 100 there. And we can continue to update all of our systems. But, occasionally, things do go wrong. All I'll say is, though, I'll come back to the point, though. We are significantly better performing on local government ombudsman complaints than the than both the local authority average and the average within the county council. And this county council performed really well on ombudsman complaints, and we are though better than average within here. I think that was all I wrote down. In terms of member training, other authorities, I've done special training as well on highways matters, because that's one which exercises all members. And highways issues are either capacity issues, design issues, or road safety issues. And I think it'd be good for the highways team to give some members some background on how they make their decisions, because the legislation has changed fundamentally over the last few years, such that now there's that message in the National Planning Policy Framework about having only reasons for refusal on highway grounds where there's a severe impact. The role of road safety audits, and there's the role though in terms of sustainable transport in this as well, and the new role of active travel. And all these things need to be focusing just to the highways element of schemes. So I think that could be a good mark for some further training.
Chair, can I just come back on that? I welcome that training, but can that also be shared with elected members as well?
Yes, so I mean,
you mentioned that. You mentioned this, that.
Great, thank you. Can I just have a question? You relatively new sort of enhanced pre-application process. We sort of talked in the pre-meeting about difficulties of complex developments where sometimes it might be sort of next to it, the building, or sensitive, or in greenbelt or whatever. That how can that help sort of enable development and make sure we get the right quality?
One of the areas that Liz and her team have been really focusing on is because we've got a new local plan as well, and legislation is changing, is upping our offer in terms of pre-application advice. And that's with a view to helping the development industry put in applications that meet our standards to begin with and to save them money and time, and to enable problems to be solved up front. But at the same time, if applications come with the right information, the right quality, we can turn them around quicker. So it's about front loading. We only introduced that in October of this year, and maybe after the first 12 months, we can look at how it's going. In the same way we introduced the validation approach. Okay, if any more questions, I think Jeff's got a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll start with pedantry. It's all right. Page 39, pie chart. See if we can get it. Pie chart on page, well, it's page 11. So 39 on the bottom of the very interestingly, the pie chart has got 7 dimensions and only 6 descriptors. So,
yeah, that might be due to a rounding area.
Yeah, hey, I'm just proving that I've read the report. Good luck. And what I wasn't certain about was some of the descriptors on here. What is the difference between shared equity and shared ownership? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Shared equity and shared ownership are different in that shared ownership is where you own a percentage of it up front. So to keep it simple, you own 50% of the house, and the remaining 50% of it is owned by somebody else. So what you do is you pay on the half you own, you pay the mortgage on.
Yes.
On the other half you pay rent on. And shared equity is a supportive approach where a supportive unit in the house owns it and they pay rent on it and they charge you for that as well. It's an involved way. It's because shared equity and shared ownership suit different people in different personal circumstances. Because some people cannot. Right. The issue with affordable housing.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah. The problem with affordable housing is people say housing is cheaper, but some people do not have access to any form of mortgage. They're not mortgageable.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So equity and ownership are two different ways of doing that to get. So shared ownership you need to be mortgageable still. Equity, you do it perfectly by an extended loan base, extended rent basis, but you're still getting ownership of it via a different route.
Not for as much.
Right.
And my guess on the missing tag is it might be community housing.
No, it's a mistake.
No, it's just surrounding it. There's
Affordable.
one of the points I made at the policy conference on affordable housing is we've got huge amounts of information on this. And one of the suggestions.
Get a pie chart, right?
Well, we can't, well, this I cut and pasted it out of another report and it's lost it on its way over.
Okay, so, you know, I only mention it for devilment.
Yeah.
So the difference between immediate or intermediate sale and discount market value,
Right,
1.1%.
right, discounted market value, right, and there are actually.
I get the concept of that, but I don't understand the difference between the two things.
Yeah, intermediate sale is where we sell it to somebody, where it's held by somebody else. So,
Right, so we would sell it to Benicia and then Benicia would sell it. To
yeah,
somebody else.
or what we are exploring at the moment, and where we will be expanding, and this is moving into the housing world, is that delivery of housing is difficult. And we're trying to push it on multiple fronts. So we may end up buying directly from house builders
Okay.
on the basis of a discounted rate, but a discounted rate to them. So say if we buy them in tens, say from Barrett's, I'll negotiate a 20% discount. Then we would do them potentially as either discounted market sales to other people or get them for rented.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. So, it was just about affordable housing, really. I just love figures because you can absolutely make them say anything you want, really. So on the graph, it shows that 22-23, there was 1,464 houses built. Now, this might be this thing about how many angels are dancing on the head of a pin, but it's back to page 11 again, page 39, depending on your preference. That paragraph under the pie chart says, during 22-23, there were 526 new dwellings committed, 132 were affordable. But it says that my complete chart here says 1,464.
Yeah, and that's because there's a difference between, remember, what's being completed now,
Yeah.
you may have granted planning permission for 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what you're securing now through decisions is a different figure to what's being completed at the moment.
That's what I thought it meant.
Yeah.
But I just think that's a bit mean-spirited because we gave 526 permissions in 22-23. But those 526 could be built 100 next year, nothing the year after, start them the year after that. In 23-24, we might have 1,000 new permissions with only 100 affordable. And those 1,000 are going to be spread over the next 4 or 5 years. So I think it's a bit, as I say, a bit disingenuous to write it like that. Or I think you should have put a bit more of a descriptor in there.
Yeah.
Especially when, you know, on the previous page, I understand the difference between, by the way, I understand the difference between permissions and actual houses. But it would be interesting to know when those 1,464 houses got the permissions.
Yeah, that's the question. And that was what I was going to say to you. Is
What another question?
look, the problem is, though, is that if we had a figure, just for the sake of argument, and we said, last year we granted 500 affordable houses, and the next year we have a figure saying we completed 500 affordable houses. Those probably won't relate to the same permissions, because actually the affordable housing that's being granted is being completed now. Some of it may have been granted pre-LGR even.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So you have to, I know it can sound like it's you're talking about apples and pears here, but you have to be able to say, are we seeing things built out, and are we granting enough permissions to keep topping up that pipeline? Because remember that when you see activity out there on construction sites, the triggers for delivering affordable housing have been negotiated. And sometimes we have to discount getting more homes, more affordable homes on a scheme for saying that the developer can hit triggers later on and get back into the building market homes first. So there's all manner of distortions in this.
So there is a solution though. Reporting forwards, you could actually report both figures. And actually, if hopefully in the end of the day, those figures all almost converge, won't they?
Yeah, I would say though, that the amount of information on affordable housing delivery, if I put all the information we've got in to answer your question, it will be as long as this report.
Yeah.
In total. Yeah.
But all I can do is read what I've got.
Yeah.
And so, all I'm saying is that somebody reading that report might think, oh, that's good. But in actuality,
It's on.
if 130, if 100 of those affordable homes are in a scheme of 400, they ain't going to get built till 2030, then it's meaningless. It's really,
Yeah.
saying.
I can take your point, but remember at the same time though, if we were in certain other local authorities, we'd be talking about a catastrophic underdelivery on housing by any way of looking at it. And what this is saying is there's a lot going on, and we are focusing, and the new local plan focuses on affordable housing particularly, and we are doing this thing of spread betting, of using different routes to delivery, because we can't rely on the market housing proportion, because as the market slows down, so the delivery of affordable housing will slow down, because the planning part of affordable housing delivers the bulk of affordable housing. So we're able to focus our direct interventions on very specialist need areas, say level access or dementia care. So there's lots of things happening here.
Yeah, I'll get that.
I'm just really important we don't get bogged down because this is fundamentally about the planning process.
Right.
And
I'll make one more comment.
Yeah.
Because I could.
it's a very important issue. Affordable housing.
For the rest of the day. But suffice to say, the need for me in a planning services performance report that is too surface a sentence.
Yeah.
You know, there should have been some explanation about, yeah, we've given that and we've given that, but there's no guarantee that they're going to be delivered at the same time or whatever.
Yeah.
So the other thing then, I just wanted to talk about the 7 years here, affordable housing. And it's not going well. 22, 23 is the second worst delivery of affordable homes over the last 7 years, regardless of, you know, and I don't know whether you've made it 7 years to get a percentage near the 17. Because it isn't going well.
I would say the way to look at, with all respects, is that the target, when you say it's going well, you know, let's put it into context. Okay, that period of the 7 years coincides with the need assessments which were carried out as part of the local plan. So the local plan actually looks back as well as forward. Okay, so 2016 is your start period for our current land supply strategy. Okay, and the target in the local plan is 17% of the market housing to be affordable.
I didn't know that.
And we are doing it at 16.4%. Yeah.
But you're relying on 16, 17 and 18, 19 and in 19, 20 to get to that 16.4%.
Yeah. But Yeah, right. The look at though is this, where do we have enough agreements in place to see delivery? That's why the figure 1,400 homes being agreed to be delivered. Yeah. All we can do on market facilitated affordable housing is negotiate them to be done.
Yeah.
We
Well,
can't go,
all I'm saying is that you can make figures look
Good, yeah.
any way you like. And from my interpretation of the figures is that our delivery of affordable dwellings isn't actually going as well as this. Because what will happen with some of the others, as we've seen in the past, when people get to the site, oh my goodness me, I've got too many problems. I can't possibly deliver the 50 homes I promised you. And then they come and bleed all over you and it's reduced to 10%.
Okay, the question though is, right, this is looking at planning performance, okay? Not how the system works, which is a national system, or the actual what happens on the ground in terms of individual sites. The question is, has the planning service performed in getting the agreements to get those houses built? And what we can do, we have done. Okay, so in other words, we've granted the permissions and negotiated them. And this gets back to the point of government using planning to deliver a range of agendas. So our bit of that deal we have done. That's why, though, we have to supplement this with our own build programme. And that's why we work with Homes England, we work with the North of Tyne, we work with the partners to lever in money to build ourselves as well.
Yeah. So just sort of.
I think there's a solution though. We should go back to what I just said. Is if you had a 7-year chart that showed the number of houses delivered each year, what percentage of them were affordable housing, and then it also in each year how many permissions were granted and what percentage of those permissions were affordable housing, you would have a full trend and you'd be able to project forward almost. Because if let's say for the last couple of years, 25%. Of everything you've permissioned is affordable, and you're running at 16.4% currently, then you'd expect that 16.4% to start rising in future because you're granting more permissions now for the future at a higher level than 16.4%.
And then all that would happen, Chair, would be the builders would come back and say, well,
that's a different issue, but at least we'd be able to get to that. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that, but
all I'm saying is all we can use is this.
They can't, in terms of granting the permission, that's what we're talking about, the planning performance, and 25%, you've got a decent level there. And
the one to add on to what Brian said, what the new local plan says as well, and Brian is right in his overview of it, basically saying inside the settlement boundaries, yes, outside, no. We have an asterisk though, and other tools is that we have met our housing target in the local plan, but we've gone beyond the government's target. So wide into the local plan is the provision for us where people have got no chance of getting a permission for market housing, where they can get permission for affordable housing. And that's how you deal with it in the rural areas, okay? And that's where we're using now the neighbourhood planning process and our community-led housing process to deliver this, okay?
Just to come back on that point, the leader of this council is on record saying the whole of Northumberland is rural. So please.
Wrong any.
Yeah, anyway, we do.
Right, okay, thank you.
I really don't have promised.
Good.
It's just when you see figures, it's just, I just enjoy them so much. I totally get the thing about enforcement. All of us have people in our ears all the time, both I'm being persecuted and this is outrageous. Why is this allowed? And I've got every sympathy for you because we play by the rules. We do everything right. And anybody who is willing not to do that, then go ahead and build something. How long is it going to take us?
Yes.
To get them to, and everybody says, oh, this is terrible. It's like, well, because we're playing by the rules and they're not. Well, I mean, it would be nice to think that if we all decide that's not right, you can send the bulldozer in the next day. But there's a whole massive legal stuff to go through and it's just a nightmare. So I've got every sympathy for you.
So can we just take that point at that point, just to sort of because we didn't really get to a decision before, just before Brian spoke. Are we all agreed as a committee broadly with what Mark said?
Absolutely.
That we support that, and we'll put that forward as a recommendation.
Yeah, Can Mark read that out again, sorry?
What I've done is for recommendation for cabinet to consider the investment in the enforcement, the addition of a rural and fighting fund to support with this work.
Director.
Can I add on to that? Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
And also further, I'm sorry, I'm just taking about enforcement. Actually, we need planning officers. We need more planning officers, as said in here, not enforcement, but planning officers. So we need to have more financial resources within the budget for planning officers. Okay.
Can I just come back there? Did you say a rural?
Yeah, rural and
Rolling.
yeah, we have picked up where Rob described it, so as you would use it to fight the fund, but the money would be recouped, so it would just keep.
So you just keep reinvesting.
And it's not all about funding, it's about support for you and your team.
So, you know, and I do totally get it, because I find it frustrating. And I know it's like, you might send a notice out that somebody didn't want to do anything about it, then, yeah, you know, you might send me a notice, I wouldn't do it, but the person who is determined that they're right, and there's nothing wrong with their buildings, they're going to take any notice of that, and how are you physically ever going to be able to stop them?
I think there's an issue here, and you're touching on it well, in that one of the big threats of enforcement action, even if not going to bulldoze it, right, is if say you built a really huge extension on your house that didn't meet building regs and didn't meet planning, and we said, okay, we think, you know, here's your enforcement notice. We may not follow it up. Well, that would mean so that you probably wouldn't be able to ever sell your house. And that is like a huge issue for most people in society. Some people who habitually play the perimeters of legislation are not concerned about it.
No, not the slightest. No, you know, I've got every sympathy, and I do find it, especially when somebody is complaining about something that you know that is an absolute total nightmare for them personally. But the thing they're looking at every day that's grinding them down is actually.
I just add one thing. Just add one thing though here, and there's been lots of case law which actually underpins our new enforcement strategy. We have to accept this is not a value-loaded statement. We have to accept that sometimes though we get drawn in to protracted neighbour disputes where there's a tit for tat, and people often go to the local government ombudsman saying, you know, his greenhouse is a foot too high.
Yeah.
And we need to say, if we are going to focus on the cases that are causing people real problems in their life, by inference, we will have to take place less emphasis on cases. So that's called expediency. And we do expediency tests on taking enforcement action because some of them are very, very minor technical breaches we are asked to enforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And but you are never going to satisfy, you know, you're right back to the person and say, hey, that's big.
I think what we're doing though, I think we've got to move on from enforcement because we've done it.
Okay. The only other thing I would say then, Chair, just was the other thing about appeals and all the rest of that stuff. Maybe we succeed in as many appeals as we do because so much gets past us that some other people might turn down. That, yeah, that's a little pool. The scope for people to complain is smaller than everywhere else because we've just let so much through.
Yeah, and that is actually a good analysis, actually, because what you're saying effectively, if everyone in the room, we could just grant stuff that we shouldn't be granting. Okay, or things at the margin.
Because obviously the people who oppose can't appeal.
Yeah.
Only the applicant can appeal.
The only thing I would say, and this strays onto the timescale issues and the speed of delivery, is a lot of appeals aren't against refusal, they're against non-determination. In other words, if any applicant at any time, if they think we're taking too long, can appeal against non-determination once it's past the 30 weeks. So, and we score where we haven't made a decision and we're still waiting to make one, we score highly on those as well.
Can I just ask, just the number of appeals that actually are because they haven't been agreed, have bad counsel. They're not appeals against the application being turned down, they're appeals because they haven't been heard.
Yeah, non-determination.
Non-determination. Great. Is that everything?
Yeah, that's
Yep.
now.
So thank you. No, we've got Nick and then we've got Dan.
Thank you.
Hopefully it's not about.
It is about enforcement, but it's a fresh question. And then I just wanted to make a comment on the report as a whole as well. So at the top of page 13, there's a graph showing how we're doing in terms of timely action enforcement. And there's a stretch target, and it's clear that we're not meeting the stretch target. Yeah. There's obviously no government target here. I think that would probably be the other line if there was one. Should we be setting our own target, our own realistic, as opposed to stretch target, and then holding ourselves to account on it? And you said that there's been an enforcement strategy set in February this year. Does that include such a target? But perhaps before you answer that, if I could also just say that I thought the report was excellent. But after I read it, I read the monitoring report, and there's a list of the different things which the committee members wanted this report to include. And I thought that maybe this report's a little bit light on 3 of them. One is resourcing. The second is the enforcement process. And the third is the cost of decisions against the council. And I think that of those 3, it's probably resourcing that would be of most interest to committee members, because there's certainly been a lot of talk about it. I just wondered if perhaps you might be able to give us more data on resourcing, maybe looking at how it's changed over the years, or maybe comparing us with other councils. Is that the sort of thing that you might then do?
That is it's a good idea. It's a substantive piece of work because not every no local authorities are set up the same each. And so there are standard questionnaires come out, like how many qualified planners do you have, on your frontline services, etc. But different planning departments include different elements. We normally benchmark ourselves with like Durham. And I did that when I first came here, when I looked at a restructure I put in place. And on that one, and Durham are pretty much exactly the same size as us, same number of applications, even though we have a few more now. And some messages came out really clearly there that they have more staff than we do for any given activity. Well, that changes all the time. And I want to say that's the case now in case they've cut or recruited more or whatever. But we do this as the mini restructuring we're doing at the moment. I'll put this at the end in terms of the changes to the planning system and planning reform. We will need to restructure to meet different emphasis from government coming out of the regeneration and the levelling up act. And so we can look at resources now. Enforcement processes, if you go to the enforcement strategy, that sets out that flow charts how we do things. I'm happy to talk about that separately. Then costs against us. There's some absolute horror stories out there, particularly in the southeast of England, of huge costs being imposed on local authorities for poor decisions. We get costs awarded against us very, very rarely, and compared with our application throughput, we must be, top 10% of the country and not losing costs. I haven't got that figure to hand at the moment.
So Chair, just on the costs, they're generally quite light, and if they're on very small or minor applications, on a major scheme, but it will be one that members will have known about. They may have made the decision at committee. We can run into significant costs that it runs to a planning hearing.
Yeah, the one big one, and this is historic, there was a housing application in New Hartley.
Hartley, but we recently had Lancaster Park as well.
Yeah, Lancaster Park, and both of those were decisions made years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk very quickly about what's on the horizon.
Can we just get Dan's question, because he's been waiting very patiently. And, oh, sorry, Nick's got one more question.
It was just to push you for an answer to my first question, which was just, do we need to set a non-stretch target for timely action on enforcement?
I have mixed views on that. And a stretch target. We have stretch targets above all the national targets. Clearly, if you just miss a stretch target, you're still going to achieve your national target. We know enforcement's controversial and of member interests, and so we have been pushing the team to close cases as quickly as possible. So I think a fairly aggressive stretch target is useful in terms of pushing up performance, and it sharpens the mind in terms of in having that difficult conversation with somebody whose neighbour's greenhouse is 12 inches too high, to say, no, we're not going to look into it. Yeah.
Fine, so we don't have a non-stretch target and you don't think we need one?
I'll put that at the end, if I may.
Okay, thanks.
Dan?
Good report, Rob. Other than in fact, on page 4 at the bottom, it talks about the statutory targets for planning. So, other than us agreeing to ask the request for more funding, like in bodies to retain people to assist with the workload, I'm very much interested in knowing about processes, because you mentioned earlier at the start, Rob, there was another authority, I think you said, who managed to do that in 6 weeks.
No, mentioned. So what I'm saying is that Redbridge's performance targets are hitting the. There are many performance measures in here, and the reason why we partnered up with Redbridge must be 2.5 years ago now, was that for the speed-based ones of all types, they score really well, and what they do. And part of it, I can go to one side, part of it is working in a London market. If they refuse an application, quite often there's 4 or 5 people waiting to come in with another scheme. Up here, a lot of our work is trying to encourage inward investment and encourage schemes to be delivered, because we have a weaker market up here. How they manage their performance, though, is just very quickly, rather than spending time to put things right, they just refuse things earlier on. I think there's a role for that in how we manage work, but I don't think that is for us, because the point that Jeff's made, I start off by saying this is a story of lots of different moving parts. If we went for quick refusals and speed, it'd be even more difficult to achieve the affordable housing outcomes, on the ground. So it's always a case of, but I would say it's a bit like I'm a football team and thinking about how much resources you put into your forwards, your midfielders and your defenders. And you need to be doing it differently in different parts of the country. The planning reform will push us in a certain direction. And one of the perverse outcomes of the planning reform agenda could be to see more refusals and applications when it's been badged as a developer-friendly, suite of changes. Okay.
So is there any sort of thoughts about that in place of, changing the process itself in line with government's rules and regulations to make it an easier process?
Well, I think you've just created the segue we needed, because Rob wanted to talk about what was announced last week in the autumn statement. So that's perhaps the time to do that now, because that probably answers that question.
Okay, right. Somebody said, I can't remember who said, it shouldn't be about looking forward, it should be looking past. This report is all about historical data. Okay. Right. In October, there was a much worked up to element of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act which includes planning reform changes, okay? And those are meant to facilitate not necessarily a quicker system, but more growth in lots of the country. So actually, what they're saying is they want it primarily to be about delivering growth, which moves us more towards the facilitation side of planning rather than the quick group performance. Okay, by the way, well, the headlines in it are, though, I've made a few notes here. There's some changes to plan making. Our local plan is still, still ink wet, but we can do supplementary plans as part of that. So for example, if we were doing some major work on regeneration in a town, we could do a supplementary plan to facilitate new types of development in a certain location. Interestingly, one of the big changes is the introduction of standard national development management policies. So our development management policies are in our local plan, and the approach is in a thing called the National Planning Policy Framework. What they need to do is bring in a series of standard planning policies and applications against. That has been driven by the need that the private sector has asked for consistency, for firms who operate in different parts of the country to know what they're going into. Those haven't been drafted yet, so we'll see what they're going to be when they come out. The problem is, bearing in mind that the planning system in this country tends to be a knee-jerk against problems manifested in the southeast of England. It could well be that perversely, the new national development management policies, far from being private sector friendly, will be more restrictive than the ones we have. Okay. And what that will mean is, and the line, I looked at the actual wording, and it was saying that where this is draft wording, so where a scheme isn't in accordance with our local plan, outside the settlement boundaries or whatever issues that the line mentions, and it doesn't fit with the new national development management policies, there has to be a strong reason to why you grant a planning permission. That could well result in more refusals, but we'll have to see what comes out of that, okay? They're going to strengthen, and I know there'll be mixed views on this, they're going to strengthen up on heritage and listed buildings, and a special regard to the desirability of preserving or enhancing heritage assets in both plan making and decision taking. The important word in there is enhancing. So that's saying for anything which affects heritage or listed buildings, it isn't a case of good enough to pass. It's got to be, it's got to be of good quality and good enough to approve. Okay. We're going to bring in stop notices for works on listed buildings, which we've been asking for a while. Things called street development orders. This was initially mooted by Gove in terms of getting to vote on your neighbour's extension, which would be an absolute recipe for communities. Actually, what it's manifested as is if you get together with the street, and it's actually a bit like you can do with a thing called a local development order. You say, actually, we all want solar panels on our roofs. Let's just make one order. We all have that apply planning permission. If you were in an area that did need planning permission for solar panels, so it could be a useful tool. I think it'll need to be done via the route of a enabled plan work. Okay. Some technical changes to that list of planning applications at the back of here. All different types. So we need to add more of them to do various things. One interesting one, and what I do like, is a thing called commencement notices. At the moment, the basic rule is you get your planning permission and you've got to have implemented it within 3 years, and then it's live forever. This is a power where if people start off work and then drag their feet or leave things half finished, we can actually have powers to get them to finish it. We'll need to see what they mean by the alleged circumstances of potential breaches of slow progress. I mean, that sounds like it's caveated already, but anyway. Enforcement. The one issue that I could use as an argument for more resources, right, is when we get enforcement complaints, we ask the question, is it a planning matter? Does it need planning permission? Is there a breach? Is it worth pursuing? One of the arguments is if you've built something and we've not picked it up within 4 years and it's immune, they are going to put that to 10 years. So in other words, the immunity period, in other words, you have to demonstrate it's been up for 10 years rather than 4 years. That's increased the power, but that will increase the number of enforcement cases we have.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes it the same as a change of use because it's 10 years for a change of use. The big one, the big issue is we use section 106s here to pay for affordable housing and education and things. And that's going to be replaced by an infrastructure levy where every developer will pay an amount on square meterage. You get the money into a fund. And unlike some of your frustrations about 106s, we can spend it on what we want to according to a strategy. So if we're more flexible, it'll require a lot of work to get it in place. The one thing they have responded to the concerns we put in is though it won't be a rigid centralised methodology for calculating what the charge is going to be. It's going to be local discretion on what you charge. So clearly in some parts of the county, we can charge a high rate per square metre. In other words, in other places, it will be a lower ones. This will be of interest to all parish and town councils because if it works in any way like the community infrastructure levy provisions, they will get between 15 and 25% of it automatically. So they will need neighbourhood plans with action plans in it to spend the money on. Okay. I think that is interesting because we are starting to add up on the side of the balances for pro or anti an application about A, delivering affordable housing and B, generating infrastructure funds. So there'll be more reasons for communities hopefully to be supportive of the right schemes. Okay. We have had worries about a tariff-based infrastructure funding arrangement in the past because, again, this system is always written with the southeast of England in mind. And I had a very unpleasant experience of it in Sheffield when we tried it, where we got much less in than we did under 106. It comes with a caveat in saying that it's expected, this new system, to deliver at least the same, if not more, affordable housing. Well, that means all the devil is in the detail of how this system will be operated. If you haven't picked it up, government is keen on putting more restrictions and powers on development in the AONB. So you'll have seen that the AONB has changed its name to the National Landscape Area. That's AONBs are always the poor cousins of national parks. And national parks always had loads of powers, and AONBs it was sort of a bit of a lighter touch. This is government upping the restrictions on AONBs to bring them closer to national parks. So we'll need a new management plan for the AONB. And I have included in the main report today the measures where they do relate to planning performance. And the thing is, I would say, and this is down to Liz, really, that all the things they are proposing put in place, we already measure, or I have included in this report already. So you'll see there at the foot of, it's my page 16. It's the penultimate bit before the implications. Is the average time to validate applications. We've got a new validation strategy. Extensions of time, it's done. Number of weeks to respond to planning breaches. That's why I said stretch target in their place now, Nick. Open enforcement cases, portion of delegated and committee decisions, which we reported already. Committee decisions to refuse permission against advice of officers. We also will do that. And then at the end of it, once we put all these new measures in place, we're going to be having a new customer experience metric. Provide a more holistic picture of a local planning authority's performance. That's always a good one, because if you ask developers who get their permission, they tend to like your service. And if you ask the public If something is refused, they want to be refused, they like your service. But if you get the other decision, they don't tend to be as happy. Okay. I'll put on the bottom of the report there just about performance. The last paragraph I stick by is saying high performance can be achieved, this is your point, Dan, by refusing more applications shortly after submission rather than working to improve them. However, when you look at our first, the corporate priorities about tackling inequality and driving economic growth, that would work against that. So you have to balance performance against the achievement of corporate objectives. So okay, talk quickly and a lot, but
Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course.
Because I think it's important to understand the background is that in the supplementary planning which we're allowed to put forward, maybe we should be able to consider affordable housing in rural areas, because we can't get, there's a big problem about it, and that's the green belt, etc. Nobody's talking about building 500 houses. People want 10 houses or 20, and people should be allowed to consider that. But that is because it's in the green belt. But unless we do something like that, then we're going to have dying villages.
It isn't in the national NPPF, isn't it? One of the reasons for building on the green belt is to create affordable housing.
But the thing is that the landowners will want some value, and that's where you have to have, even if it's 10 houses, mixed housing, or 20 houses, mixed house. But you should ask
mixed development to enable
the villagers to enable what they want, because they know, and they also know how many young people from their village they want to live in the house and stay in the villages, and that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would stand as a final point I'll say is this is all very these are all the right points we're making today. But let me wind forward back to a few planning committees ago I did up in Alnwick, where we had a 100% social housing scheme. And I had members put their hand up there and voted against it, and the existing population said, yes, we know there's a need for social housing, just not here. So it's a case of getting the right balance with community.
Just very quickly, retrospective planning.
Yeah.
We've talked about planning past tense. We're looking at the future, but we are with new government legislation. Where does retrospective planning come in there?
Yeah.
Because the full idea is somebody puts a plan application in and tweaks it, and it's not acceptable. And then you go back to plan officer and they say, well, actually, if that was the initial plan, we would have let it go. But it's just coming back to the same thing. If rules are rules.
Yeah. We lobbied for more powers on retrospectives, and government were toying with the idea of at least introducing a 200% fee for retrospective applications. And found its way through. We contacted DLUC, and they said they are looking at it probably once the new fees are bedded in, because now it's an annual increase in fees. So they are looking at it, but there was the LGA did promote the argument for more power over retrospective applications. Okay.
Okay. Colin, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd love to say something. Yes. I've sat here very quietly, and I was delighted when I saw this document. The committee asked for planning services performance report. And I see these figures all the time in various guides and bits and pieces, but when you see them all together, this tells a story of our performance, from validation through decision making through to enforcement. And when you read the report, we are performing splendidly. We have not only exceeded the government targets, but on most occasions exceeded the stretch targets on most occasions. And I'm sitting here and I'm feeling a little bit angry, actually, when I think that some members of the committee have gone away from the report and taken the opportunity to actually demolish the planning service. We've got two officers sitting here where I work with all the time. Has to be said this. Rob Murphy goes around this county, meeting parish councils and evenings, community groups, objection groups, puts his life and soul in his job. Liz does the same. And it's going to be reported, because we have a local democracy reporter here, it's going to be reported after some of the remarks from a certain councillor down here from his demolition job, that the planning department is performing terribly, is performing really well. We do know, of course, that some of the things you've mentioned about enforcement and affordable homes. Do you really think that me, as a cabinet member, I'm not aware of this? Do you not think I'm trying to do something about it? If anybody here was to sit in the SLT meetings, that's the weekly meetings the cabinet have with officers, you would see that I bang the drum all the time for affordable housing. It is my number one priority. It's extremely hard to get affordable housing. We can do affordable housing through the planning policy agreements that Councillor Rees alluded to. Sometimes take many years to happen. But to do it in the north, the rural north and the west, is extremely difficult. And that is what I am trying to do. Now then, there's been a lot of criticism here about affordable housing. A fortnight ago, we had an affordable housing summit. Less than half the councillors actually attended it. We made it hybrid, so the ones that couldn't come could do it on the computer. And I put an appeal out there that this is not just down to officers and the cabinet to try and do something about affordable housing. It's up to the members in their own areas to come forward with ideas and find areas, find bits of land. I talk about this all the time that we can look at, especially in the rural areas. One councillor came forward out of 67. Yeah, people sitting here complaining all the time. Do something about it.
I've done something.
Now then, enforcement. Oh yes, I know all about enforcement. 32 years ago, I went on to Tynedale Council. I think you know about council. Yeah, come on, a year or two later. We had something called a plan enforcement working group, where we learned all about the inner workings of enforcement. And it's not as easy as some people here try and make out. It's not just a matter of serving an enforcement notice and say, here, buddy, lad, you've got 35 days to get your job sorted. Oh, no, because when you're dealing with people who are maybe either have a lot of money or a lot of nous or not quite what you call law-abiding, they can stretch an enforcement issue out for years. Another plan applications here. They can appeal against it. They can appeal against the enforcement decisions. They keep going on and on and on. I've got one in my area. Dale knows all about it. It's been on for 10 years. This is what people can do. So with enforcement, we know there's a problem. We do.
It's the government. Can I just say, it's the government legislation doesn't help the enforcement people.
So we are aware that the two things that's been picked up on today, affordable housing, we are doing our utmost, and in enforcement, we realise there's problems. But I want to change one quick thing about enforcement. Rob mentioned the new enforcement regime we've got, where we actually prioritise things now. A lot of enforcement issues are not really significant. You know, it has to be said, but if somebody makes a complaint, it's logged, and it's one of those statistics that has to be followed up. Rob Murphy gave me an example just last week of something of a new development where all the machines had to be on site. But they came to open up that site, so some of the machines and the parking was actually on the road. Straight away, somebody complained to enforcement. So that's an enforcement issue when somebody couldn't do anything about it. You've got parish and town councils who are maybe really opposed to an application, and it goes through, it's passed. And then they're sort of like very, keen-eyed on this application and keep reporting things. So you get a lot of enforcement issues, which aren't mega big enforcement issues, but they are statistic and have to be followed up. But one of the things that's really annoyed me today is, this report I think is really good, is that some of the things that may be reported, what about the morale of our staff? You've got a table in there that shows you our staff are doing twice the work of other authorities. And that's going to be reported that, the plan system at Northumberland County Council goes down the pan. No, it hasn't. It's very good.
Right. So can I just, first of all, I think maybe we've been sitting in a different meeting. I haven't got that sense at all from this meeting. I think we have to remember it is a scrutiny meeting. What I've heard today is about a system that is working really well, where this council and its planning department are exceeding government targets. I've heard that there's a lot of passion in the room from councillors about enforcement, because it's an area that that residents in their wards raise with them. I've also heard that you as an SLT are already dealing with that, and we've given your, this committee's given its full support to dealing with that. And so I'm sorry if you got angry or across in any way, but I think we're all on the same page, and everybody is very, very keen. There's been a lot of concern raised about the case load and the resources. There's been an appeal from councillors around the table of all different parties to increase those resources to enable a relaxation in the workload. So I'm sorry you've interpreted it in that way, but I think the conclusions of this meeting are pretty much exactly what I would hope that you would be hoping for, and but we must remember at the end of the day it is a scrutiny meeting, and that's the purpose of the meeting is to.
Can I just say one thing, Chair? It's a scrutiny meeting. I don't agree with everything you said, but you should have been scrutinising what was in the report.
I think there was a little, it went slightly off topic a little bit, but I did bring it back. But broadly speaking, it was around things that were in the report, and enforcement's in the report, affordable housing is in the report, planning for development performance is in the report, and it's been quite. I think broadly it's been within.
Can I just go in quickly? Obviously the comments were directed at me. There's no malice there. I respect what's happened. I said that in the statement. I also want to bring around, I have got concerns about enforcement. I totally agree with your sentiments from the chair of where we're coming from. And dare I say, if you remember rightly, in my opening paragraph was, we went away from this report. I wished we got a verbal update which went away somewhere else, which opened the challenge to other conversations. If we'd stuck to the agenda, stuck to the report, I'd have been a quite happy guy. So there was nothing malice meant. Thank you.
Can I talk about my takeaways from this? And there's also been a corporate discussion, and we were support about looking at enforcement resourcing, about actually what we can do to tackle some of these issues. I'm going to draw on the point that Colin made about the affordable housing policy conference we had, because there was a couple of key takeaways from there as well. Okay, right. First of all, enforcement. In addition to everything we've just said, for the last hour and a half, whatever, remember we don't just do planning enforcement, we do licensing, building control, public protection, etc. And sometimes enforcement cases involve different departments. Okay, bear that in mind. Bear in mind as well the issue that Colin made about some enforcement cases actually sometimes being, very important emotionally to, say, two individuals who are neighbours, but actually aren't strategically critical. Okay. The thing I've been talking with the new monitoring officer about is us actually having, for the authority, an enforcement board, or an environmental enforcement board, whatever to call it, with members on it maybe, where for the most high profile cases, we would have a steer saying, yes, this one is a priority. And I'm sure looking around the room, we can think of really high profile needs, so actually for that one, that department will be taking the lead and it's going to be resourced. But actually for that one, we're not going to do anything. Okay. The second one is on affordable homes. Two things came out of the policy conference, and it was deliberately teed up to have this conversation. One is the member role in the point Anne was making about identifying rural exception sites thing. So often we get these come forward, and actually you may have heard from one landowner or one part of the parish council, and they are perhaps not as widely popular as they could be, because people don't tend to like affordable housing in many communities. So what we're talking about was a member role here of working with your parish and town councils to champion and identify particular sites and have that debate with the public saying, before it gets to planning, is this site suitable, do you think? And is there community consensus that this is a good affordable housing site? It will only be for 9 or 10 units maximum, but that can make a big difference in some rural settlements. And the other one, finally, and this touches on Jeff's point.
Sorry.
No, No, and it's one we talked about at the policy conference, in that we have, the world of affordable housing is extraordinarily complicated, because we have not only the planning side of it, but the work we do in terms of new build, and actually the work we do with our existing stock and how the home finder system works, etc., and the current backlog we have on that. So my suggestion to the housing policy conference was A, member role in championing sites, B, members seem to agree to have a data report, a comprehensive, everything in it, housing, social and affordable housing data report every quarter or every 6 months, where they could actually see what's happening. And hopefully then that would dovetail into when they are making difficult decisions, either to grant planning permission or they are championing sites in their areas. Because it's a complex world of affordable housing. And I think Jeff's points were all right, were correct, but they're also all wrong in terms of, it can be answered by other ways. Yeah. Okay, so that was 3 things. Coordinated enforcement across multiple disciplines, a member role in identifying sites for affordable housing, and a more regular reporting of information to members directly on data.
Right, thank you very much. Eileen's, we're going to give the last word to Eileen, but before that, I wasn't able to make the housing policy conference. Was it recorded? Could that be?
What we're doing, which I wanted to wait until today because I thought it might come into this. So we've got the transcript of it. I'm going to do a transcript of the questions and answers and circulate the presentation.
Yeah.
I think there's a video as well for it because we had Benicia Homes there, we had Advance there talking about their affordable housing ambitions, and I gave some bits as well. So it was a fairly lengthy session, but I think you'll find it useful.
It was good. Okay, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Eileen.
Thank you, because I've really got a dash up to this. I'm really sorry. Councillor Horncastle brought something up about enforcement about 20, 30 years ago when he was on some.
We were, yeah.
Yeah. About how complex enforcement was in different areas. And you had a separate group where you would look at enforcement issues as a separate group, and you had lots of training. Do you not think that's something that should be looked at here?
Yeah.
Is perhaps pulling a working group together, a separate committee sort of thing to this. But I think that would be a wasted opportunity if that's not looked into more deeply because of the complexities of enforcement. And it's enforcement right across the board as well. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's something that should be taken away and discussed and look at forming another committee or something here for that reason.
I cannot claim great insight into this apart from agreeing it's a good idea, because I did a local government association peer review visit to Bradford 2 years ago to help them with their planning and regeneration approaches. And I got then that they use this approach. And I thought, well, that's something I can pinch. I think it works well.
Can I just make a comment on that? I think that's a wonderful suggestion, Eileen. I mean, we had a affordable housing summer stroke conference a couple of weeks ago because that was a big issue. And I suggested then that we had more discussions at the last affordable housing. I think if it wasn't the subject you just mentioned couldn't be scrutinised here, it's certainly something that could be discussed at large to let people have a bit more understanding of just how complicated and how hard it is to bring a case to a close. So either here or lax, brilliant.
Could call just on the back of that, that's been requested through the southeast area, want to give more education. The more education you got, the more understanding you've got, and the less conflict you've got.
Okay. Thank you. Right, that was the last final thing, Nick, as long as it's short.
Yeah, just one of the policy conference on enforcement, might do that.
Sorry, what was that?
With the policy conference on enforcement.
All right. Oh,
yes, I do. Well, we'll let them think about it. Okay. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Rob and to Liz for an excellent presentation.
Suggestion from
there's the 2 recommendations that I've got. The one that I wrote about cabinet to consider investment in the enforcement team, and then an addition of a rural and fighting fund to support this work. And then a second recommendation came from Ryan was Cabinet to also consider additional support for the planning department to deal with increasing applications and inquiries received. And Anne's not listening.
Thank you.
Anne, can
Sorry, yeah.
I just listen to this 2 seconds?
Sorry, thank you.
This is the recommendation that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The Cabinet to also consider additional support for the planning department to deal with the increasing applications and inquiries received.
Yes, work
Have
for,
you looked at that?
yes, I'm quite happy with
Yeah.
that.
Great, everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, with that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much, both of you. Oh, sorry, the work programme. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. We'll reopen the meeting. Final item, agenda item 7, the work programme. Does anybody have any questions on that? Agree with it. Agree with it. Meeting closed. Thank you.